All right, so let me try to wrap together and give an idea of what I think the nature in the wood between the worlds actually means, the significance for the reader. So I think that the feature set characterizing the wood between the worlds can be seen as operating on two levels primarily. Number one, I think Lewis is intuitively tapping into a joy or a thrill of imagination that comes intuitively, like with what he was tapping into in the wardrobe story. We long to go to a wonderful place that is unexpected and magical and beautiful. I think that's really what fantasy is at its root, or at least the kind of pleasant children's fantasy that Narnia tends to capitalize on. I think it really is joy, to use Lewis's term from his autobiographical title, Surprised by Joy. And then number two, on a more philosophical level, I think Lewis designed the wood between the worlds in a purposeful manner that is philosophically coherent as part of this imaginary extended universe that he's imagining. So this place here, there's kind of a primeval perfection about it, almost in an Edenic sort of way, except it's clearly not at all Aslan's country in the afterlife sense or in the presence of God sense, but it bears some striking resemblances to Aslan's country. Now, if you don't remember, Aslan's country is basically the Narnian afterlife, which is shown in its early form in the Dawn Treader and in the Silver Chair books. And then at the end of the age, when Narnia is destroyed in the last battle, Aslan's country comes in to replace the destroyed world as the new and perfect, kind of the true Narnia. So the wood between the worlds is definitely not a version of heaven, because that's what Aslan's country is. That's the place of the presence of God that ends up unfolding into the kingdom of God in the coming age, and then it's the place that in the current age fills the role of the afterlife for individuals, etc. So the wood isn't Aslan's country, but it's reminiscent of Aslan's country in a lot of ways. And I think this is because, just like Aslan's country, this is a created existence of good, unspoiled by evil. It is a fundamental primeval good created by Aslan as part of the original created order. And therefore, the splendor and wondrous goodness of the nature of Aslan permeates it. Not because it's some kind of long-awaited telos, and not even because it's intended for humans at all, but just because everything Aslan makes is good. You could say that, in a way, if it represents something, it represents the delight of Aslan in creating. It represents the expansiveness and splendor of God's good universe. This is a place that is good, not because it was made for humans, but maybe more just because it reminds Diggory and Polly how much wonder and glory there is that no human has ever seen. Because there is such a thing as that which is so much greater than humans, unrelated to humans, of a value that doesn't even involve humans. In this case, something that preceded humans and will outlast the best and worst of what we could ever see around us today. It's the expansiveness of the scope of God's creative imagination. So it's not heaven or the kingdom of God or anything like that, and it's definitely not any kind of simplistic allegory for heaven or for anything else. But I think it really does relate to, and I think is at least partly inspired by, really all of the above. And it's a really wonderful thrill to read about, for me at least, both back when I was an 8 to 10-year-old, back when I was a kid, and now as a grown adult. It's also interesting to note the contrast of this place, the contrast it has with Aslan's country at the end of the last battle, because specifically this is a place that does not have change or things happening. That's a really important part of its identity. Nothing happens here. That's what this place is. But in the expansive world of the eschatological true Narnia at the end of the last battle, you get exactly the opposite. You get the sense that there is no end of complicated and beautiful and intricate layers upon layers of things happening in that world. So in that sense, it's got a little more in common with these little glimpses we get of Aslan's country that we get before the eschaton. For example, at the beginning of the Silver Chair, or at the end of the Dawn Treader story, we get these little glimpses in which Aslan's country is more of a place where you may find Aslan, but you won't find a lot of things going on. It's more a place of peace where people wait. in that version of Aslan's country, before the dawn of the eschaton, before the destruction of the first Narnia at the end of the book, The Last Battle, those descriptions don't talk about all these layers upon layers and the expansive, endless journey of development and discovery and all that. And the wood has more in common with that, simply because the wood is a place where things don't happen. It's a place where you rest, because the nature of the place is that things don't happen, but you don't get bored. You just join in the quiet, peaceful rest of things that are living in a deep and mysterious way. In a way, the wood between the worlds kind of reminds me in some ways of kind of a brighter and more pleasant version of the way Sheol is sometimes described in the Bible. Sheol, or the place of the dead in the Old Testament. Specifically, that's a place where things don't happen. It's described often using terms like rest or sleep. It's often spoken of in ways that seem to assume one can remember his life, but can no longer influence his life. He still exists and remains conscious, but he's no longer under either A, the turmoil of the troublesome life he had, or B, he's no longer able to undo the evil he did to others. So he's no longer able to work busily to cancel out the consequences he has accrued for himself, nor is he able to keep on enjoying the things he thought he was collecting for his own enjoyment. So maybe Sheol was maybe another influencing factor into Lewis's imagination that led to the way he ended up describing the wood between the worlds. But regardless, we end up with a beautiful fantasy concept that stands far apart from being merely a symbol for some kind of religious or theological truth, but instead a colorful and beautiful creation of an imagination that has been informed by all kinds of thoughts and ideas. This chapter and everything within it is the result of the joyful thrill of an imagination that sees the scope of existence and possibility as being so much broader and more mysterious than anything we see in our day-to-day life here below. All right, so I went and spent all my time talking about the nature and meaning of the wood. Now let's spend our last couple of minutes here talking about the rest of how the story unfolds during this chapter.